Have you guys ever looked around the room and noticed that everybody looks very similar? I don't know about you, but I've definitely noticed that. No offense. I know there's really big push for diversity, but even when you're out there and there's a really big audience of people, everybody looks very similar. And my name is Chen, and I want to talk today about diversity and inclusion for all. The way that I'm going to give this talk is I'm going to start about why is it important. Hopefully everybody is already clear, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about the background, who I am, why I think this is important, and then I'll talk about the framework that I use to think about this, from recruiting to the interview process to employee engagement. And these are all steps that everybody can help out in. And then finally, what are the next steps? What do you do with this information? Oops. So there's a lot of studies that show that it's really important to have people from different backgrounds. Different people bring different perspectives. Different perspectives, sometimes they'll cause some conflicts, but ultimately it does build better products. So for example, you have people who are a little bit older, somebody who might be, I think now the age classification is like 30 and plus, 40 and plus. They're a little bit older than a younger generation, the millennials. And so they all offer a little bit different perspective. But I think a great way to think about diversity is also thinking about people who come from backgrounds like someone who might have a slight disability, like they might be colorblind, right? They might look at this slide deck that I made and go, oh, you could have done a better job. And so with that, I think with those inputs, you can make a better product afterwards. If you think about inclusion, I think there are ways to think about inclusion to make people feel more welcome. If you have people from different backgrounds and it feels normal that there are people from different backgrounds, you'll be willing to speak up, to be like, hey, I noticed this thing, but because I might feel like I'm a minority here and I feel like I'm the only one who is like this, am I not speaking up because I act a certain way? So that's the motivation for it. And who am I? I am a senior software engineer at Kyruus. I am not a hiring manager. I want to emphasize that. I think everybody can help out. You don't have to be in recruiting. You don't have to be someone actively hiring. I think there are ways that you can help out. So who are part of Kyruus? And so Kyruus is a healthcare company in Boston. And we are a company that has established product market fit. And so we're trying to scale our team. And we want to make sure that we think about diversity, think about inclusion, right? As we grow our team, we want people from different perspectives. That's how we get a better product that can help patients. So I don't know if anybody's trying to do some counting right here, but we're roughly 120 to 130 people company. And so that makes it actually somewhat a fun place to be because we have a lot of opportunities to make an impact. And so just because, again, I like numbers, so let's put it in perspective. You can really see from this great whitewashed out diagram, but if you look at the percentage of female employees across the industry, so these are just a few companies, the general numbers are, you can't tell from this picture, but so the general numbers are about 30% to 40% across total workforce for these companies are female. If you look into leadership position, those numbers drop to maybe 25 to 30%. And then if we look specifically at tech jobs, that number drops even more, right? We're looking at like 15 to 20%, which is crazy, right? If you think about it, as I was corrected by my coworker the other day, women are no longer a minority. There are more women than men in the United States right now. But so where does Kyruus stand in all of this? So we're about 50% female to male. Our leadership team, if we look at VP and up, are about 33%. And in terms of our technical roles, we are about 35%. But these are all just numbers. I think at the end of the day, we still have a long way to go. I think our company still has so much to learn and grow. And the thing I also want to mention here is that I'm talking a lot about gender diversity because this is a lot of the things that I've thought a little bit more about. But a lot of the ideas that I'm going to bring to the table are not just specific to gender, right? There are a lot of underrepresented groups, including not limited to age, ethnic, people with disabilities. The list goes on, but this is just some of the ways I've thought about it in terms of gender. Cool. So again, if we go back to the framework, I think about it from recruiting, interview, and then the employee engagement. So what is your pool of candidates like? So one way that I want to think about it, I think you should think about it, is think about culture add instead of culture fit. A lot of companies think about, hey, am I looking for a candidate who fits in my culture? Like, will this person fit in? Will this person be good for this role, right? And I think it's really important to think about how they can add to your culture. They might have a different skill set, but they can add to your culture. And so these are the questions that I think that everybody can contribute in, and you don't have to be a recruiter, somebody actively recruiting, right? So where are you looking? So what kind of events are you sending people out to? Are you trying to send people to only career fairs? Are you sending people to meetups that have a little bit more diverse people, right? So are you sending people to Women Who Code, Pi Ladies, or Resilient Coders? All these different events, they're all different meetups that you can send people to. And everybody can do this. Everybody can be the one that goes out there, right? I mean, Women Who Code, for example, is not like, oh, we only want women to show up at our meetups, right? They want everybody who can be an ally in this. So I personally try to go to like a few of these different meetups, so I can send representation from my company. How are you posting? So what kind of text are you using when you're posting? And so, for example, this is another nicely washed out image. But so there's a study that's been done, a blog post that's been done by a group called Textio. And so Textio is a website that analyzes job listings, and not just job listings, but a lot of texts, and looks to see, hey, are these texts more aligned or will help to recruit people who are more of male, men, or are there going to be more female who will apply for this position? So using words like ruthlessly tend to turn off a lot more women from applying for that position. Versus if you think about like empathetic or storytelling, right? Those are certain words that can be helpful in your job description. And so I think if you're just like a software engineer, right? You're like, I'm not really recruiting, but I think you too can go look at the job descriptions and see like, hey, do I think I fit in this? Or are there ways that like you can tell somebody to change those job listings? Other things is to be mindful of where you're posting. So if you're posting only on Stack Overflow, I don't know if anybody's looked at the demographic, but Stack Overflow demographics are also not great. But so think about other sites that you can be posting at, like, again, so like Pi Ladies, if they have a place that you can post these jobs, et cetera. And then how are you looking? A lot of times we look in our network to find friends or some people to refer, right? And it's really easy to be like, well, I don't really know this person. This person's like my third connection, and they don't really look like they fit, because of how their picture is, or they look too young for the position that we're looking for. And so I think just be mindful of what you're looking at when you're trying to refer your friends or refer other people. Great, so then how do you think about the interview process? What can you do in the interview process to, everybody has a part in this interview process. So one is to have representation during the interview. So if you are somebody who is underrepresented, I highly recommend that you try to help out with the interview process. I think it's really important for you to be on the other side and to make sure that this candidate would be someone that you would want to work for and with. And so an example is actually, we do pair interviews at our company. And so we had a female coworker and a male coworker go in and interview a candidate. The candidate proceeded to only answer questions to the male candidate and direct all attention to the male candidate. It made the female coworker feel very uncomfortable. She walked out and was like, I don't want to work for this person, with this person. I don't know if it was because of gender, because I look younger than the other person, but all the other things. And then the male coworker also walked out feeling really uncomfortable too. And so just being there and it's a two-way street. It's an interview from both sides. So I think definitely thinking about, hey, does this person add to the culture of the company? Another really big thing that people talk a lot about for removing biases is to review the kinds of questions that are asked. So trying to be able to create a consistent, standard list of questions will help to make sure you don't have any biases, or to have a rubric that you follow, right? Are these the questions I'm asking because this is what a senior software engineer at this level needs to know? Or is this somebody like, I'm just asking this question because I feel like it, or I think this is roughly the right question? And so everybody, hopefully if you're at your company, you are helping out with the interview process, but these are some of the things to keep in mind is like, hey, is there a rubric that I'm following? Or how am I making sure I'm not being biased in this process? And another thing that helps is to take notes. So taking notes will help you to make sure that, like, hey, it wasn't just a momentary thing that you thought of, but also something that everybody, when you bring it back to your interview committee, can think about and discuss. And so at the end of the day, it's all about asking yourself if you're being biased in any of this procedure. There's a lot of like websites that tell you a little bit more about like what kinds of specific questions to ask, but this is like the high-level overview of what to think about. And I think this is a fine line to walk because I think you can't just go into every interview and walk out and be like, was I too insensitive right there? Did I ask something that was inappropriate? Or I think there's a fine line to walk, and I think you have to play with it and figure it out and be mindful about that. The next thing is about employee engagement. I think there's a lot of ways that everybody can help out in terms of employee engagement. So starting from within a company to create a support network. So at our company, we have a private Slack channel called ProdDev Women, and it's for anybody in product and development, so engineers, to sort of have a private way of discussing things that are relevant. And so we post things like upcoming events, like the picture on the right, on the left is, or the right for you guys, is we all went out to a women's conference together, a group of us, and we went to go support our one of our co-founders at when she spoke, right? And so also posting relevant articles. So an example is there's articles about how women tend to take notes during meetings a little bit more often. And so does that prevent them from getting promotions, or what kind of things like that? And just be mindful and calling each other out on that. And then another really cool thing that actually came out from completely grassroots efforts was another coworker and I were talking, and we're like, hey, we would like a way for us to discuss this in a bigger group. And so we actually managed to talk to HR, and we established a quarterly luncheon where every quarter we go out to eat. And so it's super awesome to see a flood of women go to the elevator banks and then go out to have discussions about mentorship, career development, communication. Are there ways that women communicate differently, right? Yesterday we had one about change management. So all these different topics, or just this luncheon was completely because another coworker and I were like, we want a way to talk with other people about this. So some people in the room are like, I'm not really in one of these underrepresented groups. What does that mean for me, right? And so one way that we thought about it was also thinking about how we can engage the greater organization. So we have a Slack channel called Recruiting Diversity, and it's a public Slack channel where everybody from the organization can participate. And so literally a few days ago, someone had posted hey, I'm about to post this job listing. Am I doing something that's dissuading people from underrepresented groups? And I'm like, yeah, you could try Textio, one of the other things we've tried for a lot of the engineering roles. So I think there are little ways like that. Another way that I'm getting support from our company is, hey, before this talk, I gave a dry run. I posted in the Slack channel. I was like, hey, I'm giving this talk. Does anybody want to listen to it? And in a meta way, right, they prepared me for this talk too, which is awesome, right? But just having people there to be allies and to start thinking about it, I think is really important. So to encourage positive language, to encourage, I know Chris, our SVP of product dev, said the other day, hey, if I say things like, hey guys, call me out on it, because a lot of people are like, we should say more of hey people, or things like that to be a little bit more sensitive, right? And so everybody can encourage each other to use a little bit more positive language. So another way is to encourage other people to think about their careers. I don't think this is specific to any diversity, but I think it's a lot about thinking about how people can help each other. And so one of the things is I know a lot of times people think, oh, it's only a manager or managee sort of thing that they should think about their career. But I think there's a lot of ways that you can help each other out by suggesting books that other people can be reading, like Lean In or other books like that, where people might not normally think about reading. Or you can encourage other people to attend tech conferences, for example, right? Tech conferences here, everybody's networking, hopefully, and also learning new topics, right? And in some ways, that's how you build your career, right? And if people go to these events and feel uncomfortable because I don't see anybody like me, because it is very scary. It's very scary going to meetups and being like, I don't know anybody, and there's 50 males to me, 1 female at a meetup. So there are definitely ways to do that. And so literally Molly over here, I managed to convince her to come and she gave an awesome talk earlier, right? And it's just because I was like, hey Molly, why don't you give a talk, right? And that's all it takes, right? You can just encourage one friend to come along and give a talk with you, or come to the tech conference. So what? So I've just talked a lot, and hopefully some people have something that they took away from this that everybody can participate, right? If you are in an underrepresented group, I highly encourage you to go out there, right? Find your coworkers who are also like you, like grab another female to be like, hey, let's go grab lunch, or let's talk to HR, or find your friends who are not just at work, right? If you are not in an underrepresented group, you can also be the allies for these groups of people, right? You can go out there and help recruit for these things, right? You can go help and be inviting your friends to go to tech conferences, right? So tell other people and bring a friend to another conference, because every little person that helps out can make a big difference. And so my hope is that, hey, by the next time this conference rolls around, that hey, this room will be full of more diverse people, right? And that looking out at the general population, I won't be having to give this talk, right? Hopefully we'll have a little bit more diversity, and we can be a little bit more inclusive. So if you want to come find me afterwards, come find me to ask about hey, I want to try this out, or if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me. And we're also hiring, in case it wasn't clear. But definitely come find me if you have any questions. I'd love to talk more about how you can make your workplace a little bit more diverse or inclusive. Do people have questions? No? Okay. Oh, questions.
I was wondering, do you recommend any tools that can help in maybe recruiting? You mentioned one tool that will determine if you're dissuading underrepresented groups.
I personally, because I'm not in recruiting, I don't necessarily know if there's a particular tool that is the best for it. I think it is just going to have to be I don't know if other people have ideas for other resources, but I bet specific meetups might have a little bit more details about what tools to use, but I don't personally know.
Without this sounding wrong.
Yeah.
Have you had any experience with associating metrics that help measure the success of this kind of effort in the company? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and because in this time and age where things are changing, I think it's really hard, right? Even when I was presenting about the male-female ratio, it's already also really hard, right? Because people identify in different ways, right? And so I've talked to HR to see if hey, can we measure this? And I think the general sentiment is a little bit we shouldn't yes, in a big picture, we should be thinking about how to make it better, but it shouldn't be we're trying to hit a specific target number. Because at that point, you're just saying this number is a great number, and that's good enough for us.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, if you don't have anything driving
Yep.
the definition of success is how do you define success?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge.
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer to that. And I asked HR that too, and I was like, is there anything that we can do, right? I would love for us to be hey, we're this good, but there's still so much to do, right? So, yeah.
I'd like to take a moment from a background in the social sciences to read the definition of a minority, because your friend is a little mistaken in the way that social scientists use the term minority. Lewis Worth defined a minority, he's a sociologist, as a group of people who, because of their physical or cultural characteristics, are singled out from the others in the society in which they live for differential and unequal treatment, and who therefore regard themselves as objects of collective discrimination. So women are almost everywhere, about 51 to 52% of the population, but remain everywhere a minority. So until women feel like we're being treated equally, we will remain minorities. So men are not the people who get to decide that women have stopped being a minority. So to your point, diversity needs to keep going. And part of the challenge is deciding when we're done. And if we let HR decide when we're done.
That's problematic, I think.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's why it's hard. It's a hard topic, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions? I know that, oh, perfect.
I care a lot about diversity, but I struggle with articulating an argument, because you brought up in the beginning that more diversity means better products. And maybe in like abstract sense I understand that, but I worry, first I don't know if there's like any data to show it, or I worry if the data is like correlation versus causality. And so I don't know how to make arguments that get people on board. But I understand my own reasons for it, but those aren't necessarily to make better products.
Right. I know there's a lot of research, but I don't know like what is the data that they were using to drive that. So I can't concretely tell you, but.
If they're not on board, like, go get a new job. Like, don't put yourself somewhere you have to make that argument.
Yeah.
The fastest argument I would say to make is the more people you have contributing to the questions that get asked leads you to a larger range of answers to choose from. If you limit what you're getting information and questions from, then you limit your solutions. And if you limit the number of people who are contributing to your solutions, you limit the number of solutions. So there's data for it.
There's also an argument, like thinking about what the reason why you diversify a stock portfolio is because, like, you know, if one is bad, the other is sort of unrelated to it, and they're likely to be good. And the same thing with like diversity in people, where like people have different ideas based on their perspective. And so, like, maybe one that is really bad, you give a bunch of different ideas that sort of unrelated to each other. There's more of a chance that you have a bunch more good ideas.
Yeah, and you also can avoid groupthink, right? If everybody's very similar, they'll all sway to go one direction, and you have a higher likelihood of something different if you have people from different backgrounds. Oh, another question.
I have a question, but I have a response to the question asked earlier about measures of success.
Sure.
I'm not sure in terms of like setting specific metrics, like what might be good. I know, so I work at Clover Health, and we recently did survey this year, and I don't think internally we have specific like numbers or percentages that we target, but having those numbers has helped us sort of track over time, like, oh, are we trending downwards or upwards? Help us like stay in check with ourselves and see where things are going. And so, we don't have, but we know that, hey, like this year we went lower on these angles. And also it correlates with like these certain groups can also be like less included in particular ways, or feeling like we have less power in decision making. And so tracking those numbers without a specific like success metric at least helps us correlate different pieces together.
Not to mention that you can't have a goal of like being representative of the population of the U.S. That's always like the other thing that we want our engineering team to be as diverse as the people who live there.
Sure. That's a great point. I think we're out of time. I think the next.
We have 6 more minutes.
Oh, we have 6 more minutes. I don't know what time it is.
I would recommend, if you're in a recruiting role, among the things to consider is not just are we getting a variety of people, but are we paying everybody equitably?
Yeah.
It's very, very common for female and minority candidates to be judged as lacking by a rotating criteria. So if you have the famous study is police chief. If you identify the resume of a police chief applicant as female and you give a comparable but slightly different male identified resume, so let's say the female PhD in criminal justice, the people making the hiring decision will say, we're totally not being biased when we pick the man, but education is really important for this role. But then when you give a very similar focus group and give the woman the PhD in criminal justice, that focus group will say, we're totally not being biased, but street smarts are really the most important thing for this job. It happens to be the thing that the dude has. So they'll make an offer and they'll make a higher offer to usually the person that they identify as the person that they see fitting this role. This isn't true just in policing. It's also if you look at nursing managers or education managers, fields that tend to be very feminized. When you get into management, it tends to be men who are managers, and it tends to be male managers who are better paid than female managers. Again, on these shifting criteria based on what the men are presenting. Sorry, this is like mine.
No, perfect.
A huge catch topic of mine. So.
No, my hope is really like people start having conversations about these. Like at the end of the day, right, it gets us nowhere if I just give a talk and nobody does anything about it, right? Like start having conversations with coworkers. Like I just heard this random talk and what do you think about it, right? Like even if it's like, I don't care. Hopefully they don't say that. But if somebody starts a conversation, that gets us somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, oh.
So I have an open question to underrepresented minorities here. I'd like to hear your opinion. For a company that has relatively few PRMs, is it best to spread them around the company or have them fewer teams, but at least they're more support each other in each team? You get my question? Do you have any experience with that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's like you need to necessarily like fine-tune things to make sure you spread out your people who are underrepresented. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that becomes tricky, right? Like I think in some ways people are somewhat underrepresented in some different ways. So I don't know, that's my thoughts about it. But
I'll jump on that one. Like, I don't want to be on picking team that out there. Like, I want to be on the team that is right fit for my
Yeah.
skills and what I want to work on. And it's also not my job to have to create the safe environment for myself to work in. It's everybody else's, right? Like, it is on part of the majority pressing causes to be better to us. And we expect that, but we can't be the ones who don't.
yeah. And just, yeah, totally, right? Like you don't want to do something just to treat them special, right? Like you don't want to interview and create rubrics just to treat someone special, but really to, and I think also the hard thing is also like, it's also hard to ask somebody who's underrepresented to always speak up about like how they feel about this issue, right? Like you can only speak up so much about that before it just becomes like, I'm just saying the same story over and over again, right? So I don't know, I don't have a great solution to your,
No, it's good. The question came up because I read that if there's only one underrepresented minority in a team, they tend to become the token, or they try to blend in with the team instead of bringing the differences that they bring to the table. So having few more support and like you start with a woman that could help them feel more confident. That's why it's
I don't know if anybody else has other opinions about that. Yeah.
About like a Slack group or some sort of like community will help. I guess like, I feel like the biggest takeaway, like sort of regardless of what solutions you choose, is that you find some way for a community to build and like sort of proactively like jump in with them and figure out like what's working and what's not versus like in that sense. And like
I think she had one more thing, and then we'll probably.
So to add just a point, for a while I was the only non-white person on my team, and also the only non-male person on my team. And while that sounds terrible, I never felt out of place on my team, and I think it's because my manager did a really good job integrating me into the team. I am buddies with everyone on my team, and I think I can go a long way, just like making someone who is clearly the minority feel comfortable as part of the team. I don't feel like I'm a token, I just feel like I'm another person on a team. And still only woman, no longer the only non-white person, but I still with my team.
Cool.
Allies.
Allies, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was the first woman, the first technical woman in my company, and we now have another technical woman that's like in our office, but not really employed by our company. And it's interesting. I will say, guys who are in charge of improving diversity, you'll hear women complain a lot about things like company morale trips to the strip club and company morale trips to the golf course. And like, we don't necessarily want to do that, but we don't necessarily not want to do that either. Like, some of us golf, but please don't organize like a ladies pedicure day. Like, if we ask for that, that's great, but don't be like, the ladies need a diversity day to go shopping. Like, please don't do that. Don't make us cry. Yeah. And
Cool.
thank you.